Well, hey, sports fans, welcome to my presentation on college basketball. In this one, we'll look at the beginnings of college basketball and, a few of the great players from the early days of college hoops and, up to more recent times as well. But this is part one of four. I really want to focus, though, at the first part here on the beginnings of college basketball and beginnings of basketball. How did basketball get going and who invented it and what were the rules and things like that when it first started and how do they compare to today? Basketball is definitely one of the most popular sports in the world today and played all over the world. Many countries play basketball. And we see that now. We see even in the professional ranks, we see a lot of really good players from all over the world. And so it's not just an American game. That's for sure. It started out that way, but not just that way anymore. So the game's beginnings, it says, can be traced back to a YMCA international training school known today as Springfield College in Springfield, Massachusetts. The sport was created by a 30-year-old PE teacher at the school named James Naismith, who was given the task in the winter of 1891 of creating a game that would keep track athletes in shape and that could prevent them from getting injured. And he was given 14 days to create this new game. So what they did was the school came to him and said, look, we got all these track athletes. We got to keep them in shape during the wintertime when they can't be out running on the snow and ice. Uh, you have 2 weeks to invent a game that will keep them in shape. So he used two peach baskets as goals, put them at opposite ends of a long court, and used a soccer ball as the forerunner of today's basketball. The first formal basketball played at the Springfield YMCA Training School under Naismith's rules was, by most accounts, on December 21st, 1891. The sport was at first promoted mainly through YMCA's, but basketball began to spread to college campuses by 1893, and the game took off. The first known college to field a team against an outside opponent was Vanderbilt University, which played against the local YMCA in Nashville, Tennessee on February 7th, 1893. And the game became popular enough to become a demonstration sport at the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis, and it continued to grow in popularity thereafter. So that's how basketball begins. Hey, invent a sport to keep our track athletes in shape in the winter, and James Naismith creates basketball. Naismith's original rules were very different than the game's rules today in some ways. In some ways, they were similar, right? But we had to start somewhere. Teams originally had 9 players per side. Of course, it's 5 now. And there were 13 rules in basketball back then. There are a lot more today. Number one, the ball may be thrown in any direction with one or both hands. Well, that's still the same. The ball may be batted in any direction with one or both hands, but never with the fist. Well, no, you can hit it with the fist today, but usually you wouldn't, but you could. A player cannot run with the ball. Well, that's true today. The player must throw it from the spot on which he catches it, allowance to be made for a man running at good speed. Now, of course, we dribble the ball today. You don't have to just throw it from where you catch it, but you can't run with it. You got to dribble it. Okay. Now, dribbling was not part of the game at first. It would come in later on. Number four, the ball must be held by the hands. The arms or body must not be used for holding it. You can hold it with you can hold it in the crook of your arm today and things like that, but usually you'd hold it with your hands, right? No shouldering, holding, pushing, striking, or tripping in any way of an opponent. That's pretty much the same today, right? I mean, the first infringement of this rule by any person shall count as a foul. Yep, same as today. The second shall disqualify him until the next goal is made, or if there was evident intent to injure the person for the whole of the game. No substitution shall be allowed. So this is similar and different, right? Uh, Fouls are still, of course, exist. The second one doesn't disqualify the person; they just get another foul. But if there is intent to injure, then they could get thrown out of the game today. Um, it says no substitution shall be allowed. Well, of course, today you can have a substitution. You need to have 5 players on the court um, in today's game. A foul is striking at the ball with the fist. Now, of course, that's not the same anymore. Okay. If either side makes 3 consecutive fouls, it shall count as a goal for the opponents. Consecutive means without the opponents in the meantime making a foul. That's not applicable today, but that's how it was originally. Number 8, a goal shall be made when the ball is thrown or batted from the grounds into the basket and stays there. That's true today, providing those defending the goal do not touch or disturb the goal. If the ball rests on the edges and the opponent moves the basket, it shall count as a goal. So that's today what we call goaltending. And so that's the same. When the ball goes out of bounds, it shall be thrown into the field and played by the first person touching it. Yeah, pretty much the same. In the case of dispute, the umpire, we call it a referee, right, shall throw it straight into the field. Now the ref doesn't necessarily throw it from out of bounds into the court, but the ref can do a jump ball, of course. The thrower in is allowed 5 seconds. That's the same as today. If he holds it longer, it shall go to the opponent. That's also the same. If any side persists in delaying the game, the umpire shall call a foul on them. Well, yeah, if you they'll first usually warn you for delay of game, but if you do it again, it's a technical foul. Okay. Number 10, the umpire shall be the judge of the men and shall note the fouls and notify the referee when 3 consecutive fouls have been made. So again, we call them all referees today, and we have a scorekeeper, okay, that the referees can work with on scoring and clock issues and things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is pretty similar, right? Number 11, the referee shall be the judge of the ball and shall decide when the ball is in play, in bounds, to which side it belongs, and shall keep the time. That's pretty much the same. I mean, the ref doesn't really keep the time much anymore. I mean, we have official scorekeepers that do that, and we have clocks in the arenas. But the ref does decide when the ball is going to be in play, blows the whistle, hands the ball to the players, and things like that. He shall decide when a goal has been made and keep account of the goals, with any other duties that are usually performed by a referee. That's pretty similar, right? Number 12, the time shall be 2 15-minute halves with 5 minutes rest between. Now, of course, it's changed today. In high school, you have 4 quarters of 8 minutes each, so a 32-minute game. In college, men, you have 2 20-minute halves, and women have 4 10-minute quarters, so it's a 40-minute game. And then in the pros, you have 4 12-minute quarters, so it's a 48-minute game. So high school is a 32-minute game, college is 40, pros is 48. And usually halftime is, well, depending on high school, college, or pro, usually it's 10 to 20 minutes. Number 13, the side making the most goals in that time shall be declared the winner. Yep, that's right. Whoever scores the most points wins. Okay, and then I have noted on the bottom there, also under the original rules, a jump ball occurred after every made basket. Now that's totally different today, right? It's crazy. We see that as crazy. So after every made basket in the original, you would go to center court and have a jump ball. So obviously you wanted somebody who could either jump the highest or was the tallest or both, because you'd always have the ball, right? And there was no mention of dribbling, but Naismith students soon started dribbling, and Naismith liked it, so it was adopted as part of the game in 1898. Wooden backboards were added in 1896, and the number of players on the court was limited to 5 in 1900. So, I mean, really by 1900, the game starts to take, I mean, well, under the original rules, it was similar to today, but by 1900, you really start to see kind of, the rules really take shape like we're kind of used to today, by and large. Of course, things change over time. We've added things and stuff, but yeah, basketball has been pretty similar for a long time. And some successful programs by decades. You can see some of these programs are blue bloods and have been great forever. Some of them, have been more upstarts, but or had their glory years. But Oklahoma A&M is Oklahoma State today. But you can see teams like Kentucky and Kansas and North Carolina. UCLA was dominant. Michigan State. These teams have been great for a long time. Now, of course, that doesn't mean they're going to be great all the time, but Kentucky seems like it's been pretty good forever, and Kansas pretty good forever, North Carolina pretty good forever. Of course, in the last 35, 40 years, Duke's been great. Arizona's been pretty consistent. University of Connecticut was always real good in the 90s and the 2000s. So some of these teams are always good. Some of them kind of come and go. But of course, college sports is so much dependent on recruiting and the caliber of player you can recruit and develop, and it has so much to do with coaching. And a coach can be at a university for 40 years. Players are there for maybe 4, right? So, university athletics, especially football and basketball, are really kind of defined by their coaches more so than their players, if you think about it. But yeah, here are some of the great programs throughout the decades. All right, I want to look at some of the great players. These guys were who I'm going to look at first here. Were kind of the, I'm not going to say notables. They're some of the greats. They didn't make necessarily my top 25 list of greatest college basketball players, but they're definitely on the list of greatest players. Uh, just not the top 25, right? So Bobcousy, you can see Bobcousy redefined and revolutionized the point guard position. He was the original guy to dribble through the legs and behind the back and the no look passes and behind the back passes and things like that. He played at Holy Cross, little Holy Cross uh, University, and he was a first team All American in 1950. He helped Holy Cross win a championship his first year there. Okay, and I love the old unis, right? Look, and they used to wear belts on their shorts, because they didn't have the elastic waistband, so they used to wear belts so the shorts wouldn't fall down. But Holy Cross retired his number 17 jersey. He's a college basketball Hall of Famer. He went on to have an illustrious career with the Boston Celtics in the pros, won many championships with the Celtics, and made them the dominant franchise in pro basketball for the 50s and 60s. Julius Erving, one of the most exciting, dominant players that we've ever seen in college and the pros. He was from New York City, or from Long Island. He did not, he wasn't really highly touted out of high school in the late 60s. He grew a bunch when he got to college. Actually, he was about, I think I want to say he was about 6 foot or 6'1" in high school, and then he gets to college and grows, 5, 6 inches. Um, but University of Massachusetts gave him a scholarship, so he went there, and he all he did was dominate. Okay, he spent 3 years in college, 3 seasons, and while he was there, you can see he averaged 26.3 points per game and 20.2 rebounds per game. One of only 6 players uh, to average 20 points a game and 20 rebounds a game in their career in college. Just unbelievable. He just dominated, and it became known as Dr. J, or the Doctor. He was a high flyer. He's the first guy really to he jumped from the free throw line and dunked the ball. Okay, he played way above the rim while he was in college. He'd go back to New York, you know, uh, in the summer times, and he would play pickup games at the legendary Rucker Park on the playgrounds in New York City. And it's unbelievable to watch the old footage they have of him. It's like is it like sends uh, you know chills up your spine. Like uh, it's so crazy to watch the old footage, because he was so legendary while he was in college, that back in New York City, on the playground, you'd have people. I mean, you'd have hundreds, if not thousands, of people around the courts, in trees, on building rooftops, watching him play. He would be playing against NBA guys, current NBA guys, and just dominating them. And so his legend, I mean, was while he was in college is when it developed. And then, of course, he goes to the pros and has one of the greatest pro careers in history, and is one of the most loved players of all time, no doubt. All right, Artist Gilmore played at little Jacksonville University, and he led them all the way to the championship game in 1970. They lost to a UCLA team that was absolutely loaded. But I mean, doesn't he? I mean, the guy looks like he's 40 years old. He's in college right there. This to me is one of the great pictures of all time. He, he's 7'2", Okay, he's just a huge guy. You can see, and we're going to see here, he was just dominant. His shot blocking and rebounding. I mean, he just dominated, right? Kind of a one-man team leading his Jacksonville University to the title game in 1970. But one of the great pictures ever, right? He on the left there, he's going up and blocking a shot. Now, for a 7'2" guy, he's getting some major air. He's got hops. He's getting off the ground big time there. But he's going up, and you're like, wait a minute, what happens? Well, how does his hand blend in, his wrist blend in with the top of the square of the backboard? Well, it's because he's wearing a white wristband on that left hand and right hand, but he's so high that his wristband is blending in with the white top of the square. That is that nuts or what? And just swatting a shot. I mean, he's got to be 12, 13 feet, you know, off the ground. Really just amazing. So you can see what Jacksonville did while he was there, 48-6. He is the only major college player to average more than 22 points and 22 rebounds a game for his career. Only one. So of course he's one of those six to do the 2020, but only one to be a 22-22. Led the nation in rebounding in 1970 and 71. And he had 8 games his senior year with at least 10 blocks. He was a first team All American in 1971. He would go on to have a good pro career as well. But wow, I mean, he just was a man among boys, really. If in most of the games he played in college, so pretty amazing. Danny Ainge, one of the great athletes, really in American history. He played at BYU. He was a guard at 6'5", quick, fast, shifty, um, the ultimate competitor. BYU was really good while he was there. You can see he averaged almost 21 points a game. He was a first team All American as a senior in 1981. He was also the Wooden Award winner, voted as the best college basketball player that year. Now, in college football, of course, the Heisman Trophy is the most illustrious award a player can win as the best player in college football for that year. Of course, there's a bunch of other awards that college football gives out, different outlets give out. But in basketball, the Naismith Award and the Wooden Award, two separate awards, and that means two different guys could win them in a given year. But those are kind of like the Heisman in for college football. So he won the Wooden Award in 1981. BYU has retired his number 22 jersey. Danny Ainge grew up in Oregon, and he was such an awesome all-around athlete that in high school, he's still the only person in American high school history to be a first team All American in football, basketball, and baseball. 3 sports, first team All American. Just that. Think about that. Wow. He also, while he was at BYU, he played briefly in the major leagues for the Toronto Blue Jays. So he played basketball, in the fall and the winter, and then he'd play baseball in the spring, and he played professional baseball. So, like I said, he's one of the great athletes of all time. Uh, Played for the Boston Celtics and the Portland Trailblazers, but mainly the Celtics in his pro career. Won some championships with Boston. Of course, played with Larry Bird and Kevin McHale on those legendary Celtics teams of the '80s. But he was a tremendous player, great athlete, and he became the general manager of the Celtics when his playing days were done. Irvin Magic Johnson, of course, one of the all-time legendary players in basketball, period. Uh, he's not on my top 25 list because he only played 2 seasons in college. He left after his sophomore year, which was almost unheard of back in the late 70s. But Magic Johnson grew up in Michigan. He became kind of a legend in high school. He was a dominant player in high school. Grew to be 6'9", 220 pounds. He played everything from point guard to center in high school. And because, I mean, we just hadn't seen a guy that was 6'9", his size, be able to dribble and pass and command the floor like he could. But he could do so in such a masterful way that he played point guard in college and the pros. Um, but 6'9" point guard, he's unheard of before him. And so he was a legend in high school, and Michigan State that was his kind of hometown team. He grew up in Lansing, Michigan, and so people in the area really wanted him to go to Michigan State for college, but Michigan State wasn't a very good team at the time. The University of Michigan was good though in Ann Arbor, and of course Michigan and Michigan State are big time rivals, and so the people of Lansing actually paid for an ad, a full page ad in the Lansing paper to try to convince him to stay home and play for Michigan State. Michigan State also got a new coach at the time named Judd Heathcote, and Magic Johnson just really liked him and liked the program and wanted to stay home. And so he chose Michigan State, and his sophomore year he led them to the national championship. While he was there for the 2 seasons, you can see he averaged 17 points, 7.5 rebounds, and almost 8 assists a game. Tremendous floor general, had eyes in the back of his head, knew where the open man was, and always put the other guy, he always put his teammate in a position to be successful. He was the most outstanding player of the Final Four in 1979, the year they won the title. And it was during his time in college, especially his sophomore year and Larry Bird's senior year, that the two developed the rivalry because Michigan State played Indiana State, Larry Bird's team, in that title game in 1979. Johnson was a first team All American as a sophomore, and of course, went on to be one of the great players in NBA history. Won 5 championships in the pros with the Lakers, and was on the Dream Team in 1992. Won a gold medal in the Olympics then. So he would definitely be on my top 25 if he had stayed in college longer, right? But just the 2 years there, but did win a national title, and is one of the greatest all-around basketball players we've ever seen. Isaiah Thomas was kind of the smaller version of Magic Johnson. Isaiah started uh, his career in 1979, and he also, like Magic, left after his sophomore season. Also, like Magic, he his sophomore year he won a national title and was the most outstanding player in the Final Four and a first team All American. Isaiah at 6'1", 170 was lightning quick. He was a sharpshooter. He was great around the hoop despite being only 6'1". Um, he was the ultimate competitor, great passer, a great dribbler. He was just a tremendous basketball player. And he chose to go to Indiana and play for the legendary coach Bobby Knight. And like I said, helped Knight win a championship in 1981. In 1980, as a freshman, he became the first freshman in Big Ten history to win all Big Ten honors. So he made an impact immediately in college. He's from the Chicago area, and chose to play for Indiana, who was a national powerhouse at the time. So after his sophomore year, he left to go to the pros, and he got drafted by the Detroit Pistons. He said that he intentionally tried to answer every interview question that when the Pistons called him in for pre-draft interviews, he tried to answer all the questions wrong. He didn't want to go to Detroit. He wanted to go to the Bulls and play for his hometown team of Chicago, right? And so he tried to ask or answer all the questions wrong, and the Detroit general manager said, "Look, you can try to do this, whatever, but we're going to draft you, okay? Because we know how good you are." And they drafted him, and he goes on to have a legendary career with the Pistons, leads them to back-to-back championships in 1989 and 1990, and is one of the great point guards to ever play the game. Hakeem Olajuwon is one of the great centers of all time. And his game really developed and blossomed the more time he had, under his belt. And here's why: because he played at the University of Houston, but he immigrated from Nigeria to play at Houston. He grew up in Nigeria, and he didn't grow up playing basketball, but he learned how to play basketball. And so University of Houston saw him. He's 7 feet tall, 235 pounds. He could jump. He was quick. He could run the floor. And so University of Houston said, heck yeah, we can develop this kid. And so he really learned how to play basketball really in college. And Houston was awesome while he was there. Of course, they also had a guy named Clyde Drexler, who would be an NBA Hall of Famer, just like Hakeem Olajuwon would become. Uh, you can see while he was at Houston, 13 points, almost 11 rebounds, 4.5 blocks a game, a dominating presence under the hoop. First team All American in 1984, and they went to the championship game in 1983 with that dominant Houston team. They were heavily favored to win the championship game against North Carolina State, but NC State beat them in one of the all-time classic championship games, and really one of the all-time upsets in college basketball. But despite losing that 1983 title game, he was voted the most outstanding player for the Final Four that year. He led Houston to the Final Four again in 1984 and lost in the championship game to Georgetown and Patrick Ewing. So they went back-to-back championship games while he was there, and they went to the Final Four in 1982 as well. So he was in the Final Four all 3 years he was in college, and twice in the championship game. Didn't win either time, but what a I mean, he was awesome. Hakeem Olajuwon would go on to the pros, and he would play for the Houston Rockets. Okay, the Rockets, kept him there in Houston. Um, and he just kept blossoming as a player and became one of the all-time great centers in pro basketball history. He was just amazing. His footwork was second to none. He was so quick. He had a million moves under the hoop. He could block any shot. He was just a great player. So Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the all-time legends. David Robinson is a legend in his own right. One of the all-time nice guys in basketball, in sports history. But David Robinson played at Navy. Super smart young man. Uh, went to went to the Naval Academy to become an officer in the Navy, and he was just such a tremendous athlete. He played for the Navy basketball team, obviously 7'1", 235 pounds. While he was there, Navy was a really good basketball team because of him. You can see 106 wins and 25 losses while he was there for 4 years. He averaged 21 points a game, 10 rebounds a game, 4 blocks a game. Um, he led the nation in rebounding in 1986, also led the nation in block shots at 5.9, 6 block shots a game in 86. Led the nation again in block shots the next year in 87 with 4.5 blocks a game. I mean, that's crazy. Okay, first team All American as a senior, second team All American as a junior. As a senior, he won all the awards. Like I said, first team All American, but also Naismith, Wooden Award, the AP National Player of the Year, the Adolph Rupp Award. Um, he he was just awesome. The thing about David Robinson though is when he got done at the Naval Academy, of course, he every pro team wanted him, but he still had to do 2 years of service in the Navy before he was eligible to play professionally in the NBA. And the San Antonio Spurs thought highly enough of him that they drafted him anyway. And they said, "Yeah, we'll take you in 2 years here. We'll get you." And well, that's what happened. His game did not suffer. He goes to the pros, becomes a dominant center in the NBA, and will win championships with the Spurs um, toward the end of his career. He was just awesome. So that's David Robinson. Hank Gathers is one of the great players in college basketball history and one of the tragic stories in college basketball history. He played at USC. Everybody knew how good he was, and USC was a good program, and he played at USC. Uh, and the coaches changed, and some things happened at USC, and so he decided to leave. And he went to Loyola Marymount because some coaching changes had happened there as well. Loyola Marymount's a little private school in California, and part of the West Coast Conference. And they had gotten a coach who was the former coach of the Lakers way back in the day. And um, this coach loved to run and gun. He loved to just fast break and, and press and I mean, his players had to be in the best shape in the world, right, to do this, but they loved playing this system because they'd score 120, 130 points a game in college. I mean, it's unheard of, right? So Hank Gathers, and his buddy Bo Kimball, there on the picture. Hank's on the left, Bo's on the right. They both played at USC. They both go to Loyola Marymount, and they tear it up. Okay, they're just running up and down the court, and they're dunking, and they're shooting threes, and Loyola Marymount became the most fun school to watch in the late 80s. Okay, um, you can see for his career he averaged 28 points a game, 11 rebounds a game, averaged 59% from the field. He's still 19th on the all-time Division One scoring list. Okay, he was just incredible, and three-time All West Coast Conference first teamer. He was a second-team All-American his senior year in 1990. He led the nation in scoring and rebounding in 1989. 32.7 points a game and 13.7 rebounds a game. Those are just out of this world numbers. But the thing about Hank Gathers, and this is where the tragedy comes in, he had a heart condition. The doctors told him, you probably shouldn't be playing basketball because you could have a heart attack at any time. You could be overworking your heart, and you could, you could die at any time. And he said, I could, but I love to play, and I just got to live my life. And so he played basketball. Well, on March 4th, during the West Coast Conference tournament, his senior year, uh, playing against the University of Portland, Hank Gathers collapsed on the court and died shortly thereafter. And so, um, who knows what his pro career would have looked like? Who knows how he would have done in the NBA? I have a feeling he would have been pretty good. But I remember I was in junior high school when that happened in 1990 when he collapsed and passed away. And it was shocking, but we all knew it was a possibility that it could happen, but it was still shocking that it did happen. So Hank Gathers, though, was exciting to watch. And man, that Loyola Marymount team was so fun uh, because, it was it was really Hank Gathers and Bo Kimball, and then some other guys, some good shooters and stuff. But these guys made the team, and of course when he went down, when Hank Gathers passed away, Loyola Marymount I think won a couple of games in the tournament that year, the big dance, but eventually gets knocked out. But with Gathers, who knows? They may have won the whole thing that year. So it would have been interesting. But yeah, he was an interesting story and just a tremendous player to watch. Chris Jackson was a phenom. Played at LSU for 2 seasons, left after his sophomore year in 1990. Just a 6'1", 160-pound guy. Wasn't real big, but lightning fast and ultra quick and a sharpshooter. 29 points a game while he was at LSU. He was a first-team All-American as a freshman and a sophomore. He had the highest scoring average for a freshman in college history at 30.2 points a game. Okay, twice the SEC Player of the Year, both years he was in college. He was just a perfectionist. He'd be the kind of guy that would say, "Okay, practice is done. I'm going to stay. I'm going to shoot 500 more shots, or I'm going to stay and I'm going to shoot free throws. And I have to make 10 in a row without hitting the rim. Okay, I have to swish 10 in a row before I can leave," type thing. And so he just was the ultimate perfectionist when it came to that, and he was just a tremendous player, no doubt about it. Would go on to convert to Islam and change his name to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf when he was in the pros. He was a very good professional player as well for a number of years, but he was a legend in college. Christian Leitner could very well be on the top 25 list. I guess any of these guys could, uh, but Christian Leitner was one of the probably the most polarizing college basketball player in history. Uh, you loved him if you were a Duke fan, and you hated him if you weren't. He played for 4 years at Duke. He was one of the most accomplished players in history. Uh, he was a tremendous player. Duke, while he was there, was awesome. They were always vying for the championship, if not winning it. Lightner was a big guy, 6'11", 220. Um, Played under the hoop, but could shoot outside as well. You can see what he averaged: 16.6 points a game for his career, almost 8 rebounds. Uh, he was very reliable shooter and a great free throw shooter, over 80%. Led Duke to back-to-back championships his junior and senior years, and they went to the Final Four his freshman and sophomore year. In his sophomore year, they lost in the title game. So he was in the championship game 3 out of the 4 years in college. He was the most outstanding player in the Final Four as a junior. He was a first-team All-American as a senior and a second-team All-American as a junior. His senior year, he won all the awards. You can see the Naismith, the AP, the Rupp, and the Wooden Award. And then he was chosen as the only college player to be on the Dream Team in 1992 Olympics, the first year that they allowed pros in the Olympics. They wanted one college player to be on the team, and he was the guy. A lot of it was just timing. It was, he'd finished college, and he was one of the choices. It's interesting though that it kind of came down to Lightner and Shaquille O'Neal, who was also leaving college out of LSU for that dream team spot, but Lightner got the nod. Of course, he didn't play much during the Olympics, but um, and he didn't really end up having a great pro career. He played for quite a while in the pros, but he was never a dominant player in the pros. But in college, he was clutch. He was, hit huge shots. One of the most famous shots, of course, in the NCAA tournament against Kentucky. Uh, and he was just a great player, but he'd get under your skin. He would annoy the opponents. He would annoy his own teammates, and had plenty of instances where his own teammates in the locker room wanted to fight him. So he was a polarizing figure, but one of the all-time greats. You can still see he holds all-time NCAA tournament records for games played because he was in so many, right? Free throws attempted, free throws made, and most points. So that is Christian Laettner. And speaking of Shaquille O'Neal, like we just did, here he is. Played 3 seasons in college and decided to go pro. 7'1", 285 pounds in college. Of course, in the pros, he got up at times to about 330 pounds. He was just a dominant physical figure. But he was not tall and oafy. This guy was athletic. He could run the court. And who would get in his way if he ran the court? If he's coming at you, you get out of the way. He could dribble a little bit. He could pass a little bit. He would rip down the rims, when he dunked. Uh, he he was super quick. Had great footwork. Hard to believe a guy that big could be that quick, but he was. In college at LSU, there he averaged over 21 and a half points a game, 13 and a half rebounds, and 4.5 blocks a game for his career. Two-time first-team All-American. Okay, as a sophomore and a junior. He was just so dominant, so physically dominant, and just and it's a good thing he's a nice guy because Shaq actually is he's kind of a big teddy bear in a lot of ways because a guy get knocked down, he'd help him up. I mean, if he had been mean, you might have seen dead bodies all over the basketball court while he was playing. I mean, he was just crazy. Um, you can see he led the nation in rebounding as a sophomore and block shots as a junior. Twice the SEC Player of the Year, both sophomore and junior years. And his sophomore year he was the AP and Rupp trophy winner. So I mean, pretty dang good, right? But we hadn't seen a physical presence like this in a long time, maybe ever. And he could back it up. Now the thing, his weakness was shooting free throws, and of course his outside shot didn't really have one. He had to play under the hoop, but shooting free throws was his weakness. But he did everything else on the court, I mean, fairly well, and some things he did extraordinarily well. And so, of course, he would go on to have an illustrious pro career, uh, win multiple championships, and be one of the all-time great centers that we've seen. Grant Hill was one of the great players, all-around players in college basketball history. He played at Duke in the early to mid 90s. 6'8", wiry, could jump, could run. He was just a lean, mean machine, really. Of course, Duke continued their winning traditions while he was there. He and Christian Leitner's careers overlapped by a couple of years there. He averaged almost 15 points a game, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists, almost 2 steals a game as well, and helped Duke win those back-to-back titles in 1991 and 92. He also went to the championship game in 1994 as a senior, lost to Arkansas in a great game, but he was Grant Hill could do everything on a basketball court. He was a first-team All-American as a senior and a second-team All-American as a junior. He was the defensive player of the year in college basketball as a junior. Um, he was just a great player. Would go on to have a great pro career, a long pro career, very successful. At times plagued by injuries a little bit, but very successful nonetheless. And so that's Grant Hill. Tim Duncan, kind of like Hakeem Olajuwon, really learned how to play basketball in college. Tim Duncan grew up in the Virgin Islands, which is U.S. territory, and he was a swimmer. 6'11", 250 pounds, but he was a swimmer, and he didn't really learn how to play basketball until kind of his late teens. And Wake Forest University in North Carolina uh, scouted him out and said, "Yeah, we can develop this kid into something, and we can hone his skills," and they did. And while he was there at Wake Forest in the mid 90s, they were great. He was 16 and a half points a game, over 12 rebounds, and almost 4 blocks per game for his career. Led the nation in rebounding as a senior. He was twice first team All American, junior and senior year. And sophomore through senior year, he was the defensive player of the year in college. Twice the ACC player of the year, also, junior and senior year. I mean, just an illustrious career. His senior year, he won all the awards. Like you can see, he was first team All American, he was defensive player of the year, and then Naismith, AP, Rupp, and Wooden Award winner. Just did everything. Of course, he was the #1 overall pick in the draft when he came out of college, and the San Antonio Spurs had that pick. They picked him, and so they paired David Robinson, who 7'1" center, with Tim Duncan, a 6'11" power forward slash center, and the Spurs went on to win some championships. So, but Tim Duncan, yeah, imagine if he had stayed a swimmer, right, instead of a basketball player. Duncan would go on, like I said, with the Spurs to win like 5 championships, and just he's one of the great all-time NBA players. Tyler Hansbrough is without a doubt one of the great players in college basketball history. Did not go on to have a great pro career, but a tremendous college career. 4 years in North Carolina. North Carolina was awesome while he was there. You can see he averaged 20 points a game, 8.5 rebounds. He was a first team All American as a sophomore, junior, and senior. One of the rare 3-time first team All Americans. He was a second team All American as a freshman. Okay, so he was just an impact player all 4 years. He's the ACC's all-time leading scorer. If you think about the schools in the ACC, North Carolina, Duke, North Carolina State, Wake Forest, I mean, some really good schools who've had some really good players, right? He's their all-time leading scorer. He's 13th on the Division I all-time list. Uh, he helped North Carolina to the Final Four as a junior in 2008, and then they won the whole thing in 2009 when he was a senior. Um, in 2008, as a junior, is when he really kind of swept all the awards. He was Naismith and AP, Rupp, and Wooden Award winners as a junior. 4-time first team All ACC player, and he was just a scrapper, competitor. He'd do all the dirty work under the hoop, and he was an emotional player, and he'd fight for every rebound, and I mean he was a guy you'd want on your team, no doubt about it. He was a really good player. Jimmer Fredette, the Jimmer, BYU star, played guard, and Jimmer was, what can we say? He just took college basketball by storm, really starting kind of his junior year, and he became the guy to watch in college basketball his last couple seasons. Uh, First team All American as a senior. In fact, this is kind of cool. The Senior Class Award winner in 2011 as a senior, um, given to the most outstanding senior student athlete in 10 Division I sports. So, man, that's quite an honor. But he led the nation in scoring as a senior as well, with 28.9 points per game. And as a senior, he won all the awards, right? The Naismith, the AP, the Rupp, the Wooden, Best Male College Athlete ESPY Award, okay, that year as well. He was three-time first team All Mountain West, but like I said, his junior and senior year, he became the guy to watch. His range was basically unlimited. The guy would pull up, 7 or 8 feet behind the 3-point line, and nobody was doing that. Nobody would, who would think to guard somebody 7 feet behind the 3-point line, right? And he'd pull up and just shoot a three and just knock it down. I mean, and then he'd go to the hoop, and guys think he was going to shoot from the outside, and then he'd pump fake and go to the hoop, and hit a layup or hit an and one. But it was his range and his flair for the dramatic that just captivated people. I mean, we had not seen that before, and he just would shoot from anywhere on the court, and he would just he could hit anything. He was so fun to watch, and he's only 6'2", 195 pounds, not a huge guy, right? But when he got going, forget about it. I mean, he'd score 40, points and 50 points in a game, and you just couldn't believe what you were seeing. And yeah, definitely some of the best BYU basketball years were with Jimmer. It was fun to watch him, no doubt about it.